everyone. Welcome to my podcast, Conversations with David. I am your host, David Owasi. And on this podcast, we're talking to professionals and entrepreneurs across the country. We're learning about what keeps them passionate, what keeps them going, and we're learning lessons along the way. Now, I am here with my friend Tariq Bakir, and I am very excited about him. He's a good friend of mine. I've known him for a couple of years. Why don't you introduce yourself, Tariq?
Sure. Yeah, my name's Tariq. I know David from when we used to be in College Pro together. So I ran a painting franchise all through university, so for 5 years. Since then, I've been on my own, starting out my own general contracting company, and then ultimately pursuing my main passion of being a music artist. So I'm a rapper, producer, DJ. So yeah.
That's exciting, man. And we're going to talk about your music some more throughout our chat. But I'm super excited to have this conversation with you, Tariq. Now, I just want to get us started with some questions just about your background. I know you were not
Sure.
originally born in Canada. Can you just give me a little bit of an idea of your background?
Yeah, so my heritage is Palestinian. So with the war there, the family kind of scattered. So I was born in Dubai, and that's where I
Hmm.
lived till like around 6 years old. And then my parents decided to make the move to Canada just because the way it's set up there. Even though I was born there, because I'm Palestinian, I was like born as a refugee,
Right.
so I didn't really have the same opportunities I could have.
Hmm.
So I moved to Toronto when I was 6 or 7, and then I ended up coming to Edmonton like 10 years ago. So
Nice. So Edmonton is home for you now, right?
yeah,
Perfect. And yeah, so that's pretty exciting. And I know you were in university, of Edmonton there, right? What did you study at the university?
I was at the U of A. Yeah, I have a degree in urban planning.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So one of the cool things, Tariq, that really connected us over the years is, our experience running a business with College Pro Painters. What really, took you along that path? Like, how did you even got into running a business? Was that something that you had interest in prior, uh, or how did that come about?
Honestly, no, it wasn't. I was at the U of A career fair. I was in my first year of bio, like
Hmm.
bioscience, and I just wanted to see kind of what opportunities were out there. And while I was walking around and not really seeing much because it was a lot of like lab stuff, which didn't seem super appealing to me.
Hmm.
I just got approached. I think it was Carly actually, and I got approached, and they basically just hit me with this quick pitch like, "Have you ever thought about managing a business?" I'm like, not really, but that sounds cool. And they're like, okay, fill out this form. So sorry. By the way, I'm in a closet. This is my studio room, but it's actually a closet. So
uh,
it has this like light that turns off. It's like a motion sensor. So
that is hilarious.
yeah. But I usually when I'm recording, I have the lights off and I have like my Vibey lights. So
Right.
but yeah. So I just once in a while have to do that.
No problem.
But anyways, yes. So we got to talking, and initially I thought it was like going to be just a summer job where I'm like hired as like a manager or something. And then once I had the actual meeting and interview and was told kind of how everything works, I don't know. It was never something that I had thought about like at all. I never thought I would run a business. I was never even interested in it. Like I was always an academic kid, and I thought I would just be a doctor, like something like that, psychologist, or I don't know. But it just sounded really cool to me. Uh, he showed me the numbers, showed me the autonomy. I think was what was really cool. The way that it was pitched to me was very like, do you think you can handle this? And that kind of gets me hyped up when people kind of talk to me like that, because then I'm like, well, obviously, what do you mean? Why not, right? Because Zach's like questioning like if I'm able, and then um, and then I think he showed me the numbers for 1 year and was like, if you hit this certain revenue, you can make this much money. And I'm like, well, I don't know. I was naive and confident, and I'm like, well, why wouldn't I be one of the higher ranked people, right? So to be honest, what got me was kind of the challenge.
Right.
Like I'm gonna prove to this guy like you're gonna put this in front of me. You think I can't do it? Like, let's do it, right? And then from there, man, just pretty much as soon as I got into it, like I was like really interested, and eventually, pretty quickly, it like took priority over school. Like within like a few months, I was already so bought in, and then that's how I kind of changed my program too, because I realized like although I liked science, like the root in the sciences was like a lot more like lab work or research. And I found that I really liked interacting with people and just having the multiple tasks going on with business. So so yeah, and then I switched out of science and yeah.
And the rest is history, as they
Yeah,
say.
man.
Well, that's pretty remarkable, man. You know, my journey as well into college pro and entrepreneurship is quite similar to yours. Same thing. I was approached at the university. The challenge was put to me. Can you run a business? And I was like, of course I can run a business. And pretty much it just took over my whole life, which is pretty remarkable. But you know, I'm curious, Tariq, as an immigrant for yourself, what was
Mhm.
it like, you know, being relatively new to the country? I know I guess you were probably in the country much longer than I have been. How many years have you been in Canada so far?
Um like 17, 18 years,
So,
like
okay,
most of my
yes.
life. Yeah.
Yeah, most of your life. But still, for me, myself, I know when I started running a business, I found that there was a lot of gaps in just understanding the climate, the
Mhm.
people, how to like sell, how to talk, how to do business. What was that like for you, for yourself? Was it a huge transition curve? What was that like?
Like from the perspective of being an immigrant or just in general?
Yeah, from the perspective of being an immigrant, did that make any difference at all to your experience running a business, or was it
Um,
just like,
I think there is some influences.
mhm,
Um, on one hand, I would say like just being an immigrant, like my parents had to work a lot harder than like for example, like my dad's got an engineering degree and was an engineer in Dubai, and like my mom was like working in a bank, and like he was driving like a delivery truck for a bit, like so like all of that experience he had didn't matter. So like he had to start basically prove himself from the beginning even though he already has. So they have always I think the work ethic I have just came natural because of that, just the pace that they had to be at. So I think as an immigrant, I think just the mentality of like perseverance helped. It was always there, and just like the idea of like there has to be a struggle to succeed. Whereas some other people who maybe didn't do as well in college pro, once they saw that first sign of struggle and like, oh my God, this seems impossible, then they're just like, this is too much for me, which is fine. But like for me, I was brought up with that, right? So I'm like, this is normal. This is how you make it. So in that sense, I would actually say it was an advantage. And just like my parents have always instilled the like, we came all the way here for you guys, so like you better do something, like something good. Um, yeah. Um, the other thing, I guess you were talking about like with business interactions and stuff. I guess it is a little different. Like, I mean, my parents never ran a business. Like they didn't have the ability to because they didn't have any extra capital, right? We're just trying to, as an immigrant, you're just trying to get money and start. So all of that was pretty foreign to me. Like just running a business, like I don't know, pretty much all aspects of it was not something I was ever brought up with. And then I guess yeah, I guess like the business transactions I have seen have been like my dad with like other people from like our culture, and the way that like our culture does business is a lot different than here. I mean, good and bad. Like, so there was, yeah, just like being customized to like my demographic here, which is very mixed, like white people, Indian people, Chinese people, like, um, so yeah.
That's
But
very cool, man. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And just to give our listeners some context, so when we say College Pro is a program specifically designed for university students, and they can run painting companies, so residential and commercial painting. And now College Pro is no longer in existence, which is quite a shame, but it was a very useful experience for people like myself and Tariq to really be able to build a business and build that entrepreneurship abilities, not just only the hustle, which we'll talk about in a minute, but also the skill itself on how to actually run a business, how to do your numbers, how to do sales. I think that was huge, especially for myself and for you as well. Now, you were
absolutely.
talking about the hustle. How much of your success would you put to being able to learn how to hustle? And what would you define as having a hustle mentality, or what does that mean to you?
Good question. I guess pretty much all of it, because like my first year,
Hmm.
I didn't quite have. I mean, I feel like I'm naturally pretty good at like socializing and like just picking things up. But like
Right.
what the success of my first year was pretty much just based on my hustle, not as much like my skills. Like I wasn't very organized. I was just worked hard enough to make it happen. So that kind of set the base for me, right? Because I've never worked as hard as I have that one summer since, and I hope I never have to. Like it was unrealistic. It was crazy. But I guess what that does is when you put yourself when you just throw yourself into something, and like my choices, because I don't know if we were together in my first year, right? Like I signed up, like everyone signed up anywhere from like December the year before till like January. Like I didn't get started till March. So I missed out on a lot. I had to learn, and like also the bookings were already happening. So like I remember April 1st, I had nothing booked still. And like Zach gave me that talk. Like you realize if you don't book something right away, you're gonna have to paint, or like you're gonna be in debt. So like I had no real choice. I'm like, man, I'm already in this. Um so yeah, just like having to hustle that hard just to even break even and then eventually be successful. Uh, when the following years came up, and just in general other things in my life, I think what it does is it makes you resilient, and like it just makes you less phased with other things and problems that can come up, because I'm like, well, I always think back, like, is it as bad as when I was working like 16 hours and like solving every problem that could possibly happen? Probably not. Like it so I you know what I mean? When you go through that much hard work and just quick learning, I think it builds the backbone when you continue on, where you can just handle a lot more.
Absolutely. I definitely do agree with what you said there because right now, like I enjoy problems. And for me, problems is not a bad thing. It's actually an opportunity to, to do stuff, to accomplish stuff. And I think it goes back to some of those early days running a business where just similar to yours, to your experience, my first year was all about just trying to break even and not to leave my first year in debt. And moving forward from then on, anytime I encounter any problems, I always feel like if I can handle that first year of my college pro experience, I can pretty much handle anything, which is a unique thing to have. Tariq, I'm very curious. Question for yourself. What would your advice be to, say a young, immigrant person who is just new to Canada from, anywhere in the world? They're trying to get their feet settled, and they're thinking maybe entrepreneurship and owning a business might be that route for them. What would your advice be for someone who is starting out that journey? Based on your experience, what would be your advice be, or what would you tell yourself? Your how old were you? Maybe 19, 20-year-old self back then. What would your advice be to yourself?
Ooh. Um I would say like for one, you can never get too much advice. Like don't ever be shy to ask questions. Um and just to like you can learn a small thing from like everyone you meet. So absorb as much as you can. And hmm I would say like obviously as an entrepreneur you're self-directed and it's all on you. But for me, I found when I was responsible to other people, whether that would be like I have staff that I need to keep busy, or like I have friends in the same position that I don't want to let them down. I have to be on it so they can be on it. I think when you include other people to hold you accountable, there's more support and like you will do better because most people are going to perform better when there's someone else involved,
True, true.
right?
I definitely agree with those 2 points you made, which is number one, always be willing to learn. For myself, I think I definitely agree with that. Like feedback was a huge thing for me because there is no point if you don't know something. There is no point trying to hide it. Like other people are there to
Yeah,
really help you increase your skill. And
very true.
asking for feedback is almost like a favor to me. Like if you're telling me this is how I can improve this skill, please tell me, right? I want to absorb that information. And also, I do agree with your point on really working with other people. I found that when I had a team that I really, trusted and who will do anything for me, like I would go the extra mile just to
Yeah,
make sure that they have jobs lined up for the summer. Even though it was in my interest as a business owner to have those jobs lined up, but even more so, I would go knock on doors at 9 p.m. at night just to make sure that my crew had enough stuff. So I guess surrounding yourself with good people and
yeah,
being accountable to them and making sure that you're there for them helps you yourself in your performance. Would you agree with
yeah.
that?
And I mean, to build off your point, like you said, how it was for them, but it's also in your interest. Like I'll give you an example.
Mm-hmm.
Like 2 years ago, I ran my biggest business, and what happened was I was interviewing people. I was being proactive, and instead of interviewing last minute, I actually was starting interviews like February. So I just had too many great applicants to turn down. I'm like, these are all just such awesome people that I would have on my team. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna hire all of them, and it was like 10 people. So and they were all with the exception of a couple. Like I kept a core group of eight pretty much the entire summer, and I didn't want to let any of them go because they were all great and like I had a connection with them. So like I worked so hard, man. That's the year I did 350. But like this year, for example, because of COVID, I didn't have preseason bookings and I wasn't sure what was going to happen with my business. So I took the time of, and also there's no home shows, which was like my main source of income or of leads. So I just use subcontractors pretty much. And I'm like, whatever I book, I'll sub it out. And then I'll take this time to work on my music, which is fine. But like when my motivation has now become, I need to book work so I can make money, like yeah, I just naturally work way less hard because the only pressure is money, which to me, like, I mean, I like to make money, but it's not enough for me to like go out of my comfort zone. But when I'm accountable for someone else, then I do whatever it takes to not let them down before I would let myself down, right? So
Absolutely, man. And I guess this kind of circles back to the whole idea of, your why. Like, why are you doing this? And I
yeah,
know when I used to run my business every year, I set my goals. I'm always thinking, okay, so why am I doing this year? Of course, I want to make money, but like you rightly said, at some point, making money is not really a motivation. Now, of course, I know your business now has pivoted from College Pro. You're now trying to expand. Can you just share a little bit of that journey, how your expansion is going, and how you're managing that as a entrepreneur?
for sure, man. It's definitely, yeah, it's different, new challenges.
Mm-hmm.
The reason I expanded initially was like the whole no compete clause. So I still wanted to be able to run a business, but like I had to get around the fact that I couldn't directly be a painting company for 2 years after leaving College Pro. Um, while I was running the business, like I kind of just unintentionally got into other trades. Like for example, there were so many times where I'd be doing painting as part of like a bigger reno, and it was starting to get frustrating, like dealing with other people's schedules and stuff like that. So just through the vine, like I had a painter who was also a carpenter, and then I met a guy who's really good at flooring, and then I took on my first job like 3 years ago where I managed all three. and it went really well. So from there, I knew that that was something I wanted to do, just how efficiently it worked and how satisfying it was to just have that relationship with the customer where I'll take care of all of it. So since then, I was kind of like slowly trying to learn more about other trades, getting other connections. But this year, I mean, it was challenging because like my main source of marketing was gone, so I had to get creative. So I started to take up more like social media marketing. So actually, Facebook has been my main source this year. Um, yeah, and yeah, and then just kind of kind of felt like my first year where I didn't really know much about painting, but I just tried to figure it out on the way. So like there would be times. One thing I did realize is when you're getting into general contracting, it's a lot harder to like pick and choose what you do. Like for example, like yeah, I do this, but I don't really know that. Like people generally either want one or two services or they want someone to do everything. So in order to like book say a full basement reno or something like that, I had to very quickly get the contacts, like learn to quote and learn about the trade enough to be able to do that. So
Yeah, very
kind of
neat.
yeah.
And of course, kind of just tying on that point and the challenges with the pandemic, like generally, how has the pandemic affected you as an entrepreneur? I know you were kind of caught surprised, like you were. I know when we spoke last, you said you took some months off, anticipating that it would be business as usual, and then you kind of was you were disappointed because you were not prepared for the year. Like, can you just walk me
Yeah.
through how that happened and how you responded to that?
Yeah, exactly. So I had a busy year of college pro, and then come around November, like
Mm-hmm.
I did some traveling. I went to Asia, I went to South America, and then my plan, because typically like November till February is pretty dead, and then
Mm-hmm.
February you just start your marketing, and then you know what I mean, you book up. So I took November to February off to travel and to work on music, and then I booked 5 different home shows. Like first one starting early March, and then it was like March, April, May, June. Like it was, and then my plan was like do that, do the cold calling. I ordered a bunch of flyers, and then the pandemic hit like February or March. So I was bummed because I had just taken like 4 months off. So I took another almost 4 months off. So it was stress. It is, yeah. So like I still had I don't know. The hardest part was I was getting leads, but this was like during the heat of the quarantine where nobody was comfortable with me coming doing estimates, understandably. So I was front loading my marketing costs because I had a telemarketer going. So I was paying her, instead of paying her per estimate like I usually do, I was paying half for a lead now and then half when it becomes an estimate. And it got to the point where it was like almost $1,700 of just future leads. And that was starting to get really stressful because I'm like, is this ever gonna happen? And then that's when I decided to adapt and try the Facebook. And then I was doing Facebook and then doing quotes off of pictures and them sending me measurements.
Hmm. That is
Um,
pretty creative. I guess the challenge of the pandemic is it forces you to be creative and just come up with
yeah,
new ways of doing things. That's very, very cool, man. And of course, now your business is in a more healthy shape. Now you've kind of adjusted to the pandemic. Very cool. Well, it was nice chatting about your college pro experience for sure. I'm very curious now. I know your music is a huge, huge piece of kind of your evolution now, and where you're trying to move into. Can you just tell me a little bit more about your music for my listeners who definitely have not been introduced to your music? What is your music all about? What inspires you, and why your music? Like, what's that important? Why is that important to you?
sure. So I'm a hip hop artist. Um, kind of play with a lot of different styles, but in general, conscious hip hop with like some old school flavors to it. Um, I've been I've been into music since like high school. Like I used to freestyle basically all the time. I did some rap battles, some ciphers. but I was never really serious into like writing or anything. And then around 18 or 19, I got introduced to DJing. So I did that for like 3, 4 years, playing clubs, playing like festivals, corporate wedding. Like, so DJing gave me a pretty fundamental understanding of music because I had like thousands and thousands of tracks, phrasing, EQing, like, and then eventually I was starting to get pretty into like the festival scene. I was playing like electronic music and stuff, which was great. But it kind of, I think it was last year, I started to kind of fall out of it a little bit because I came to realize, unfortunately, in that scene, like there is a lot of like partying and drugs, alcohol, and stuff like that. And like, sure, I like to have fun, but like I've always been a pretty ambitious guy and like put value my business and stuff. I started to kind of lose interest in that, and then refound my like love for hip hop. And it kind of, where I made the switch was like ultimately I still want to make music, but like I want to make music that can have a positive impact. Like I want to be able to like eventually show my uncle, my cousins, like my family, my grandma, and also like my fans can all appreciate something with my music. So so yeah, I started writing last year, seriously. I can't say I started rapping last year because I've been rapping for a really long time. But yeah, I started like getting into songwriting and stuff, and producing and mixing and stuff last year. And yeah, basically just trying to expand my sound. But
Yeah, man. I am a huge fan of your music. I've listened to a few of your tracks, even on Spotify as well. I think I follow you on Spotify. And for me, I'm more of a beats guy, so I really love your beats. It's very catchy. It's very like clean and just neat. A lot of work and a lot of thought you've put into it. So nice
sure.
work on that. And also, of course, your lyrics and your rhymes are pretty neat as well. So very cool. But walk me through your creative process. I know you've been doing some videos where you're trying to like show your fans sort of the behind the scenes, how you come up with your lines, some of the inspiration. What's your creative process like?
I like, for how I write a song, basically.
Yeah, for how you come up with some of your lines. I know a lot of them has to do with, you've been doing this for years and years, and some of them come naturally to you, but I'm just
Yeah.
very curious, how would you typically go through your creative process?
I'm also very beat oriented. Like it always
Mm-hmm.
starts with the beat.
Right.
Some people like can write a song on a piece of paper and they
Mm-hmm.
approach a producer to make a beat out of it. But like I always work beat first.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm lucky to have a lot of friends and just connections I know
Mm-hmm.
where I have access to a lot of sweet beats. I know how to make beats myself too. So like if I find a really nice sample sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
I use Splice, where basically
Okay.
you can just find different sounds, different samples, um, or like just YouTube. Sometimes I'll YouTube like some jazz or blues. I
Mm-hmm.
find a nice sample, chop it up. I have this little beat pad here.
Oh, nice, nice.
Play with that. So I'm all right at making beats, but at this point now, like I have so many friends and other connections that are way better than me. So I'm just spoiled with like beats that are sent to me. But if I find a beat I like and I'm just feeling it that day, um, I usually go in my car and just play the beat, and then I just freestyle a few times. Usually that's right off the bat, that's how I get the flow. That's how I get like how I want to approach it with my voice. I want to go hard. I want to go a little more melodic. And then I just record. I just use my phone and record like 3 or 4 takes of me just freestyling random stuff. Sometimes it makes sense. Sometimes it's just like gibberish. And then I basically write down everything that I recorded onto like a Google Doc pretty much. It's kind of a weird way to do it. It's very like, but I organize everything I wrote into like certain content, and I like piece them together later. And then sometimes from that batch, I'll make like 2 or 3 songs. Like that EP I just dropped, like several freestyle sessions into like a pool of lyrics that I spliced up and then put to the different beats that I had. So that's and then that way that's how I do projects. Like that one was like the boom bap one. My next one's gonna be more soft, like slower songs. So yeah, pretty much it's pretty loose. Like sometimes I just if I'm really feeling like saying something specifically is where I'll write it from start to finish. But a lot of the time it's I capture a certain moment. Like if I'm like, hey, I feel like I want to express something at this moment, I'll like
Hmm.
record that and then yeah.
Very cool, man. That's pretty awesome. Now, I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you want to kind of just drop a little bit of a bar for me and my listeners, I would welcome it. But if that's kind of put you on the spot right now, of course, you don't have to do that. Is that something you're open to, or that's kind of like putting you on the spot?
I mean it is putting me on the spot, but
Okay, okay,
it's
okay.
more
I'm
so
just
like what do I share, right? Like
hmm.
mm,
Well, in so I'm curious for yourself, where do you see your music going? Like yourself as an artist, like what's the evolution? Where do you see yourself in a couple of years, say, 4 or 5 years from now? How do you envision your music or your music career evolving?
um like career wise or artistically or
I guess both, right? So of course, in the end, you want to be an established name, I would assume.
yeah.
But from career perspective, where do you see yourself from the music itself? Where do you see that evolving to?
Um, well, I've been putting like a lot of my focus on creatively right now. Obviously, I have been putting an effort to building a fan base and marketing, but um, there's just still more for me to figure out of my own sound and more things to explore. So, what I've been doing is like I have a bunch of songs unreleased and like songs that I'm working on, and I've decided instead of just doing singles, I'm going to compile them like I did with that EP to like 4 or 5 track songs of like a certain style, and then just do a different style and evolve that way. So like I have the boom bap stuff, and then I'm going to go with like the lo-fi kind of more emotional stuff, and then I have some trappy stuff, and then that way I'm evolving my sound and people can follow that, but also it's a way for me to gauge what's clicking, what's and then like after I say 4 of those, I can look back and say, okay, what did people really resonate with? What do I really resonate with? And then my goal is to be able to combine everything and yeah, like right now is me trying to make good music and trying to get good at it and make quantity, but eventually there's a point where it's like to be a great artist is when you're innovating. Like how am I going to combine everything and make something that's completely unique to me? So within 4 to 5 years, that's my goal artistically is like to figure out that signature sound that like I'm known for that only I really have. Um, uh, yeah, exactly. Like, how am I contributing to the evolution of all music? Like doing, like Kendrick Lamar, he came out with like awesome rapping. He's a great rapper, and then drops some like opera singing, rapping, like rock mixed with hip hop, mixed with soul stuff that like you've never heard before, and that's like contribution that in 20 years people like inspired from that, right? Career wise, like I've always been like, even with my business, I was never someone to set like crazy goals for myself. I'm more of like a small goals kind of guy. Like, like I remember in my first year, I'm like, yeah, it'd be cool to hit over 110 so I can make it to press club, and that's basically what I did. I'm like, usually my goal is pretty close to what I actually want. Like, so for me, I'm just making small goals. Like, I want to right now is about building a fan base. If I can build, um, let's say in by 5 years, not saying followers, but like let's say 1,000 actual fans, like people that follow me on all platforms that like look forward to my releases. And then my idea with that, I kind of did the math. If you have 1,000 fans, like that's kind of where you can live off of music in terms of like they can stream, they might buy a hoodie each, let's say, come to one of your shows, and when you multiply all that, $20 from each person times 1,000 or whatever, like $80 from each person. So it's just about building a loyal fan base, and then as I get more fans, is incorporating my business skills to like monetize it. And that's what it's not the same as it was before with music, where like you have to make money from like it's combining a bunch of streams together, like merch, streaming, like Patreon, sponsorships, paid features, like helping other artists market themselves, producing for other artists. So
It's a little bit of
it's a,
everything.
it's a very long game. Yeah.
And how can people, who are interested in finding more about your music, how can they contact you, or how can they find your stuff?
I would say the best way I'm most active on Instagram.
Okay.
And then on my website on Instagram, my link is like my fan link to all the platforms. Like my
Mm,
music's on every major platform.
right.
So yeah, Instagram, Tariq Music. I don't know if you
Mm-hmm.
can link that on the video or something.
Yeah, I'm sure we can definitely do that. Absolutely. Very exciting stuff. Now, one of the, I guess, the last phase I want to talk about is, something that combines your music and your business. And for me, myself, I'm a huge believer in soft skills. I know a lot of people don't like to call it soft skills anymore because now it's becoming almost a hard skill, something you have to succeed. And slash, emotional intelligence, being able to read people. And I know earlier in the conversation you mentioned that was something you naturally kind of had aptitude for, being able to work with people, interact with people. What would you say is the role of skills like that in career success, whether it's in music, whether it's in business, and what role has that played in your success personally?
Honestly, as I've continued in this, I've realized like it is equally, if not more important than like my prior business.
Right.
Like I thought, music was just making music, but you have to have all those skills. Like it comes in so many forms. Music industry, especially now, it's kind of toned down, but like pre-COVID, like it's all about networking to be able to get like gigs, because that's how you get paid is by playing live. And how you get these live shows is meeting promoters, club owners, etc., venues, and then building a tour like that. So it's you have to have skills, and every single person's trying to do that, right? Like if you're a promoter or you're like a venue owner, you probably get like 5 texts a day of people, hey, I want to play your show, hey, check out my stuff, right? So it's how do I make a genuine relationship with this guy, even though he knows that I have another interest of like promoting myself. Like how do I make a genuine relationship that's mutually beneficial where I'm not being spammy? And it's not easy, man. It requires you to like actually care for beyond your own music. Like you have to care for what they're doing. You have to care for the music scene, let's say in Canada or in Alberta on the whole. You have to show how you can provide to better the community for yourself. And that does require a lot of emotional intelligence to understand what the purpose is and like what their goal is. Um, Another thing too is that maybe that's helped with my success. Like it's not just me. Like I have a team, and it kind of just happened. But I mean, I do have those skills from running a business. Like I have a couple engineers that work with me now, where our workflow is just getting exponentially better every track. And that's when you were saying like how everything sounds so neat. Like that's a lot of Zoom calls and stuff with my engineer working together. So learning how to speak in their terms, because I'm not an engineer myself, and like how to communicate what I have in my head to like tangible things that they can do. Um, Same thing with graphic design, like my album covers and stuff. How do I visual like how yeah, I had that idea, but like to be able to explain it, like there's a lot, man. Yeah, it requires you to narrow down your ideas into something that's tangible for others and even for your audience. Like how like this EP, I spent a lot of the time was like, how can I make this a cohesive piece? Like that took a lot of time, like making every track have similar elements and stuff. Like so, it's not just here's 5 random tracks. Like yeah,
Very
so
neat, man. From what I hear from you, sounds like, and this is one of my philosophy as well. It's, giving out more in value than what you ask for payment.
for real.
So when
Yeah.
you're trying to like create those relationships, of course, they're getting 5 to 10 texts a day. But if you're saying this is actually how I can contribute to the music community. This is how I can actually add value and improve everyone else. So you're getting a little bit, I'm getting a little bit, everyone is sort of a win-win situation. I feel like that's how you build, strong relationships. But last question for yourself, Tariq, considering that you've come a long way from your, our college pro days, what would you say were some of the things you did to improve some of those skills, the networking, the communication, the, kind of not being too selfish when you're trying to, find what you're looking for? How did you grow those skills? Were there specific things you did, or what would your advice be to someone who's trying to grow skills?
Yeah, that's I mean, with age, I feel like you get better, but
Right.
I think if there was some advice I would give that I wish I would have known earlier, because I've kind of tainted relationships and stuff because of it, is entrepreneurial people are ambitious and like can be intense, and to some people that can be seen as arrogance, like or like this guy's just too much, like, you know what I mean? Always talk. So I feel like you have to be you have to be sensitive to like how, I'm not saying care about what people think, but like you have to understand how what you're saying can be perceived externally. And then just making sure also not to rush things too much. Like I feel like I jumped the gun too soon a lot of times. Like I remember with DJing, I had my controller for like 5 months. I played the college pro houseboating party, and then I emailed every single club in Edmonton like I want to play. And like in retrospect, I was not ready, not even close. Then I did play the gig. Luckily, this guy gave me a chance, and it was awful. But then I learned from that. But you just can't rush things too much. Or like I've messaged. One stupid thing that I did was like when I wrote my first batch of songs, like I was like, oh well, now I wrote songs. They're great, and I went and spent a bunch of money on recording them in a studio, and I didn't release a lot of them because by the time those songs are ready, I exponentially got so much better that they were just terrible songs compared to what I was at. I'm just like messaging big time producers who are charging a lot of money for when I'm not at that level. So it's just like you just have to let things happen more organically. Like always be ambitious, but just have the idea that like whatever you're doing now isn't where you're that's not your cap. Like you're gonna be so much better. So don't reach too far because entrepreneurial people have that mentality. Like,
Right.
so
I definitely agree with that, and I've been in that boat myself. I mean, this even from my college pro painting days, where I'm trying to bid for projects that I definitely can
yeah.
handle, and my crew can handle. And sometimes I have messed up, right? Where
Yeah.
I take on a project, I talk big, and it's good to have those as an
It
entrepreneur,
is for sure.
talk big game and try to perform. But sometimes, it might be a little too much. So from what I got from your answer, though, it sounds like the first thing that you said is responsible for your growth is kind of empathy,
Hmm.
kind of just putting yourself in other people's shoes and trying to make sure that whatever you say, you're putting yourself in their shoes to receive that, to make sure that it lands the right way, and just thinking about that before saying it, and also just patience, knowing that you're a work in progress and you'll get better, and wherever you are, it's not the best thing you're going to do. So
Yeah.
it's not the end of the world if things don't work out. So yeah, that's just a very, very good
You have
insight
to
and
like
advice.
balance patience with ambition. Like you can't have
Mm,
too much of either. And
true.
that's like one of the trickiest balances that I felt in that sense was like it's constantly checking yourself, I guess. You just have to check yourself every week. Let's say like stop before you impulsively do something, like think where you're at and like just yeah, trust the process. Yeah.
Now you make that point. I know that for me, like journaling was a huge part of me having that internal process with myself, and just kind of like writing my experiences. If I'm feeling frustrated about situations or whatever it is, just writing about it helps me to be aware of it, and then I can control myself, or I can tone it down a little bit, or take it up a notch a little bit. But
Hmm.
I guess I definitely agree with that point. Hey man, it's been such a pleasure chatting with you here. There's been so much we've discussed, and I think my listeners will have taken a lot of value from our conversation. Any last words from yourself before we call it a day?
Um, Well, I appreciate you having me out. It's nice for me to kind of you're asking me questions that I haven't asked myself in a while.
Hmm.
So it's nice to get that perspective too, and it's nice to kind of hear from someone else kind of where I'm at, because when you're in the mix of it, you don't really think of it as like being businessy or anything. But
Right.
yeah, so I appreciate that, and I gotta say, yeah, if anyone wants to check out my music, um, it's Tariq Music, Three Eyes Q Music,
Hmm.
Tariq on all platforms,
I
and
definitely will be including links for sure.
yeah, for sure. And if anyone's enjoying it or wants to give me feedback, that would be awesome. Feel free to send me a message or
That's
ask me any
awesome.
more questions about anything we've talked about.
That's amazing, Tariq. It's been a pleasure here. I really appreciate your time, and I'm sure we'll do some follow up in a couple of years when you're a big name. But
That sounds good to me, man.
it's been a pleasure, buddy.